Rebecca Dawson. I'm here for a few moments with you to discuss this month's message from the Masters, September 2019, Change Your View. So, wow, has August been tumultuous for many of us, and even though the energy is lifting towards the end of August and into September, it's still an incredibly confusing time for many of us. The compass is spinning in many directions, and there is a really intense experience at this time of compression and vastness sitting right alongside each other. So many of us feeling the freedom to be able to move forward into something new, but feeling the restriction of the external experience not matching our sense of enthusiasm for change. So this compression experience that many of us are having is often a result of what happens when the expansion that is within you really starts to become very present within this earth reality. The compression of the constructs of belief, of the constructs of laws, order, restrictions, history, tradition, feels more oppressive than it has done ever before because of that newness and vastness that you're experiencing within your internal state. So it can really feel like you're being squeezed at this time. It can be a confusing time in terms of your emotions as well, because you feel this sense of freedom. I can do anything. But at the same time, it's very difficult to feel a reference for that in your exterior reality, because everything appears to be staying fairly much the same. So the juxtaposition of compression and expansiveness can make many of us start to feel lonely and isolated. In this sense, we feel like we have so much room around us. It's what we've always wanted to have, and yet we don't know what to do with it yet. We don't feel that we're visible to others around us. The reference points for our safety are not there. It's very difficult to feel as if we have a sense of purpose or role with other people in our lives, particularly because we've been going through an experience of dropping those traditional roles in the last few years. A big question that's come up in the last few weeks from many people has been about purpose and relevance. How is it that what I know is relevant to the world that we find ourselves in? How is it that we can find a sense of purpose to anchor ourselves into human life again after we've had the shift? Some of these questions are going to be brought up and answered in this week's webinar that's free, that we're going to be running on the 29th of August, because it's such a strong theme right now. And really it is about how is it that we can feel solid within where we are. It's not so much this month about how do we find our place within everything else. And so this month's message from the Masters is principally about focusing on your own view of things and not becoming distracted or so bound to referencing yourself with what's being presented to you in the world. We do want to get very clear that this month in September, there is a very much a surging in a presentation of the world. And it's a wonderful reminder for us to be mindful that how we feel in the vastness of ourselves is more apparent and more relevant than the compression that we're being presented with in our exterior reality. Particularly in the media at this time, there is a lot of reinforcement around rules, around boundaries, about regulations, about things that we believe to be problems that we would like to see resolved, changes that we would like to see happening in our world. It's a very frustrating time to feel freedom within you and not be presented with that reality in terms of popular media, in terms of what's being reinforced within our social, political and economic structures. So what is it that we can do in September to start to feel a little bit more relaxed into this juxtaposition of the compression and the vastness within? One thing that I would be really suggesting for all of us, including myself, is to have days where we give ourselves permission not to choose. Quite often we think that being reborn again into our sovereignty and really starting to discover that we have choice and free will that exists beyond law and order, beyond social constructs and beliefs. It's very easy for us to think, well, we have all this choice, we have all this sovereignty. Why is it that I still feel so stagnated? Why is it that I am not choosing? It's important to remember during these times that sovereignty is also about choosing not to choose. And we don't need to be forced into choosing if we're not in a position where consciousness actually wants to engage in that moment with that option. So it can be very freeing to give yourself permission not to choose if you do not feel that there is a clarity about which way you want to go. So many women especially, and I know that there's a lot of men listening to this as well, but so many women especially believe that action is the way out of stagnation. And yet what we're beginning to discover now is that giving yourself permission to have that freedom of choice is the way out of stagnation. Does that always mean that you must choose something? Or does that mean that today I am choosing not to choose? Today is not a choice day. And then tomorrow, perhaps it will be. So the spontaneous choice is very, very important, and not feeling as if you must choose one thing or another. What's a very practical application for this? Well, you have a choice between two options. You either go out with a group of friends tonight, or you choose to have dinner with your parents. You may not feel that you are in clarity about which one to choose. And quite a few people have been contacting me lately saying they're just feeling as if they're not having clarity around anything. The indecisiveness is there for them. They feel like they're in limbo. All that's required in that moment is to remind yourself, I'm consciously choosing not to choose. And the amount of pressure that releases from yourself and allows you to sink back into your centeredness, back into where creation sits, more often than not, will bring the clarity you're looking for, or will enable you to see other options that are better options for you. Let's not forget that we often choose between A and B instead of knowing that there are other options that might not have appeared yet. As the masters are often telling us, there's always more. So September for us is a time where free will moves to another experience. The right to choose and the right not to choose. The right to be in action and the right to be in inaction. So it's not a month to really start to set sequence in motion. It's not really a month to start to set goals. It's a month to actually start playing with the freedom that is now afforded to us. Now, the message from the Masters this month is being very much about paying attention to that inner space so that you're not so distracted by this constant reinforcement of what's going wrong in the world, and to relax deeply into that ultimate choice, which is in I choose what I wish to focus on. So the great love and joy that we hold for the earth is also going to be in the belief and the knowing that the earth knows what it's doing. Now, this can be really challenging for a lot of people on the planet who believe that it's up to humanity to shape and curate the world for what we want it to be for our experience. There's a couple of different ways that I view that. One is, yes, it's up to humanity to be able to create the experience they want for the earth, but it's not so much about what we do externally, what we do physically to rearrange the earth, because that's a third dimensional action. It's more about that multi-dimensional approach where we choose to see the earth in its truth. And it can be often challenging when we start to think, well, the earth was created in totality. The earth is a creation of source energy and source consciousness itself, as are we. How is it that humans have the ability and the control to be able to dictate the earth experience? Is this possible on a material level? Is it possible on a physical level? Or does it all have to do with our perspective, with our internal truth? Because from our internal truth, we all know that's where our reality springs from. My question for myself and for many of you is this: when we begin to see ourselves as the most perfect creator species, will we then begin to see the earth in its most perfect creator form? Something for us all, I think, to reflect upon in September. Also, please be aware some of the physical symptoms are beginning to subside in September. September is more about how we are looking at the way that we think and our emotional construct rather than the physical symptoms this month. So a lot of you will begin to start to feel this lift. Breathing gets easier. A lot of the chest discomfort is going. It's really going to be about challenging yourself. Whereas my focus at this time, what am I seeing? What am I thinking? Is this feeling state arising from within me, or is it being reflected from what's being presented to me? So good news for those of you who have had a lot of physical recalibration in the last few months. That's definitely going to get easier. A lot of us that have been holding a lot of fluid and a lot of weight are going to see that start to drop in September. Generally, a feeling of reinvigoration physically is what we can expect. However, you will be challenged with what it is that you're thinking and being reminded constantly, where did this feeling state actually come from? So there are my thoughts for September 2019. Change your view. And I hope that you all have a wonderful September. It's spring here in the Southern Hemisphere, so I'm looking forward to newness being apparent in the spaces between the obvious. Many blessings to you, and thanks for listening.